Welcome to the Author's Edge radio show with Guy L. Freer and Bob Price. Now, their show airs nationwide on the My Genre Radio Network, Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. Each week on their show, they help authors create books that transform our lives and imaginations. Through radio excellence, they create a unique community resource, one that promotes, connects, and fosters a sense of well-being. Gael and Bob maintain a focus on sharing books, publishing, marketing, and writing solutions. They serve listeners by providing outlets for their creative skills and energies, and they help them flourish in the competitive marketplace. Their weekly show provides intros, writing spotlights, helps you in promoting your book, your writing, your publishing, your marketing tidbits, and much more. Okay, audience, here's Gael and Bob.
I'm on. Hi, everyone. Today, unfortunately, Bob is not with us. Boo. He is unfortunately at home dealing with a sciatic nerve that's not being very cooperative. So I think he's laying in bed with a lot of painkillers and he's trying to get better. So hopefully he will be with us next time around. But today we have with us Andrew Doty.
Hello.
And I welcome you. He began publishing poetry at the age of 16, and he's no longer 16. And he began a career as an editor after earning a degree in creative writing from Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. His former roles include working as an editor-in-chief of Punctum, did I say that right?
That's right.
Books and director of editorial services at Something or Other Publishing, which I find is a very interesting name. And he now provides comprehensive and a la carte publishing and marketing services to authors, independent publishers, nonprofits, and small businesses through his publishing consultancy, Edit Right. And that's it's Edit, EDIT, WRIGHT.
That's right.
Okay.
Like
Make sure we say WRIGHT. Okay. He made sure that he put it in big bold letters when he sent it to me. Make sure it's WRIGHT.
You got that, everybody?
Got that, everyone?
Who knows how many emails have disappeared into the void because they never reached me.
That's right. Okay. So welcome, Andy.
Thank you very much.
Now we're going to start from the very beginning.
Sure. Yeah. 1987. I'm just kidding.
So when did you start writing poetry?
Yeah.
Now you said you published at 16. But when did you start?
Yeah, that's a great question. I did not document this, so I do not know when I began writing poetry, but it has been a lifelong thing for me. I grew up in the Midwest, so I was very familiar with the Spoon River Anthology. It was taught in classes when I was a kid. And
why poetry, though? I mean, most young people I've seen, they write short stories.
For sure.
And they write long stories, and they're, into all kinds of goth stories and things like that. I mean, I've taught English for 39 years. It's mostly stories that they like, not usually poetry.
Yeah, fiction
especially
and
for
prose.
boys.
Fiction and prose are definitely a lot more popular, right?
Right.
Not to psychoanalyze myself, but I have certainly been a fan of music my entire life. My parents are both huge into music, and I fell in love with the rhyming. I fell in love with the flow and the patterns of songwriting, and I'm confident that is why I started writing poetry. Maybe that is an influence, or maybe that is a byproduct of my love for brevity. I'm not a super wordy person. I hope that is okay during this interview. But
you're going to have to become wordy because I refuse to do all the talking. Okay, my husband gets really irritated with me at night because I do all the talking. So you're going to have to do some of that.
Well, thank you in advance for carrying this conversation.
But
your first attempt at poetry. What was?
Yeah.
Was it rhyming? Was it what did you do when you did your first?
Yeah, great question. Well, so I grew up something that people in this room will be able to relate to. I grew up before the ability to look up song lyrics online. and see what people were singing. At that time, I had tape cassettes, I had CDs, and not all of those came with liner notes where you could read what the lyrics were that
Right.
people were saying. But at the time, I was very invested in finding out what I was singing along to, what the actual lyrics were that I might be mishearing. And so I would sit with my headphones or with my ear right next to the speaker, and I would play through songs and I would write down what I thought that I heard line by line, pausing, rewinding, and
Oh
replaying
my goodness.
until I had figured out what all the words were. And that was probably my first instance of writing out poems, which are essentially indistinguishable from lyrics, right? So it's fair to say that my first poems were not indeed mine, but just transcribing what other people were singing or what I thought that they were singing.
And then you got into your own poetry.
Yeah, well, certainly in grade school and high school, teachers
Do you remember
encourage
your first poem?
writing. I don't. I'm really sorry. It's probably lost in one of the hundreds of tiny little pocket-sized notebooks that I carried with me at the time. Miniature.
Do you still
composition
have any of
journals. I have a handful. Yeah, I'm sure they're in the basement somewhere, sitting in a Rubbermaid container.
Did you publish anything?
Okay, so yeah, admittedly, I don't exercise poetry as much these days as I used to, but it was formative to me back then. I was really getting into poetry in my high school years at the same time that the internet was becoming a thing, more accessible to people who simply had a dial-up modem and not to people who only knew how to code.
The dial-up,
The screaming beast of the dial-up modem. And yeah, I grew up in the middle of nowhere where we had just the slowest sludge of an internet connection possible. So it made every internet page that much more precious and valuable to really like lean into and find out what was out there on the internet. And one of the places that I found was a place called Starlight Cafe. And this is a website that would allow people to upload and publish their own poems. This was my first experience in self-publishing, and it really facilitated a community of poets to read each other's poems, to comment on poems, and to do collaborations. So rather than just scribble everything in my notebook, I started taking the poems that I thought were worth uploading and publish them online, formatting them with my own elaborate text and fonts and colors and really making it my own sort of brand. Not a brand I identify with these days, a very angsty teen.
And how was that successful in your head, or?
Yeah, it was. I mean, lots of people expressed interest in my poetry back then through the Starlight Cafe. I got to make friends. I got to form community there. It was definitely an experience in the power of disseminating the written word and publishing and finding, I don't want to say fans, but people who are interested in reading and discussing the work. I also, one of my earlier experiences from this was, a website that I won't share the name of because I don't want any lawyers coming after me for libel, but this was a website that took interest in my poetry and told me, we think that your poems are some of the best out there, and we would like to publish them in our anthology of poems. This was a huge opportunity for me. It made me feel amazing. It made me feel like people really cared about what I was writing, and that my writing was a cut above and worthy of being in this anthology. And then they offered to sell me copies of this book. They were something like $60 a copy, and I quickly found that they, in fact, published these constantly, not just once or twice a year, but every week or so. They're publishing a new 300 or 400 or 500 page anthology. So thankfully I was clever enough to recognize that this was a scam when you saw one. Yes, I don't quite want to call it a scam, but it was certainly an opportunity to stoke people's egos and then capitalize on it. So I avoided that at the time, and I think many years later this translated into a passion of mine, which is helping to prevent writers and authors from getting scammed. Because, like I said, it is very easy to stoke a writer's ego. Of course,
Oh,
writers want
without a doubt.
readers and want an audience and want people to appreciate them. And the publishing industry is absolutely full of scammers. So when I found
Yes.
an organization here in St. Louis called the St. Louis Publishers Association and started attending meetings, I saw that this was a through line, that every single month people would show up to our meetings and say, I wrote a book, and then I was approached by a publisher and they asked for $3,000, $5,000
Right.
in order to publish my book. And then they
Disappeared.
they published it, and now they just want to sell me copies for $10 a copy, and they're not doing anything to market me. They're not doing anything to represent me. They're not essentially a publishing company, right?
Right. And that happens more times than not.
It does feel like it happens more times than not. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't remember what the numbers are exactly, but some roundabout numbers I've heard are that among self-published authors, most never sell more than 30 books or so in the
Right.
entire lifespan of their book. So
And
yeah,
it's very sad. It really is.
Yeah.
It really, really, really is. So from writing poetry, okay,
Yeah.
you go to college and then you get into editing. And how does that happen?
Yeah, well, I got very lucky. I wanna say thanks to the person who introduced me to this whole industry and the concept of editing as a career, which somehow I blundered through an undergrad in an English program and never even really considered that I could get paid as an editor for the skills that I had. You know, jumping through some irrelevant parts of the story, after college, I was working in a coffee shop post 2008 recession when there were no real careers available for us grads.
Yeah.
And one day, an old professor of mine came in. Her name is Eileen Joy, and we got to chatting. She just happened to come in at the same time that I was getting off my shift. I said, "Can I get you a coffee? Can we sit down, hang out?" And she said, I just started a publishing company. We're very fresh. We are turning the model on its head. We want to publish academic and scholarly works that other people won't publish, that they're too afraid of publishing, or that they want to curate and edit to a degree that the authors aren't willing to compromise on. She says we want to publish radical feminist anarchist philosophy stuff that we're not seeing enough of in the world, and that there are a lot of writers who want to contribute to these topics. I said, well, that sounds really, really awesome. She said, we actually need some editors. She said, I've read what you wrote in my class. I know that you would be a good editor. Is that something that would be interesting to you? I said, absolutely. I'm working 25 hours a week at a coffee shop. I'm making enough money to pay rent. I'm making enough money to go buy beers on the weekend. That is relevant because she said we are a volunteer. This is a volunteer publishing company. We sell our physical books online for people who want to buy them, but we also have a dedication to making books available for free to people who cannot afford to buy them. This was all scholarly and academic work, so so in their eyes, this is a key part of research. And for students who are researching their topics and want access to works that they can include in their own research, it's really important for them to be able to find diverse sources to pull from. And
Right.
yet many of these sources are locked behind paywalls that the university is essentially forced into paying thousands of dollars for, and a student in the university might be privileged enough to have access to this because of their university. But students whose universities don't pay for those subscriptions, and students who are studying on their own, maybe not affiliated with a university, or affiliated with a university that can't afford a subscription, can't access all that research without
Right.
paying, a $100, $200, $300 subscription
Right.
to access written work. So it was important at Punctum Books. I should name the publisher. That was Punctum Books.
Punctum
It was
Books.
really important to make these books available as free PDF downloads to people who could not afford. And
Right.
I believe that is still the model. So I volunteered to edit books, and I don't want to brag, but it became very apparent very quickly that this was for me, that I really enjoyed editing. I had a knack for editing. I heard it in feedback from Eileen. I heard it in feedback from the authors that I worked with right away, that they really enjoyed the editing that I provided, and I was really enjoying doing it. So I continued to volunteer for several years while I also continued to develop a career in coffee. And after some years, I had taken over management of a coffee roaster, an organic coffee roaster over in the Metro East area in Illinois. It was exhausting. I was working 60 to 70 hours a week. I was over caffeinated all of the time. I was stressed out. I was not sleeping well. And I wasn't doing well from a mental health standpoint. It was really wearing me down. Simultaneously, on top of these 60 to 70 hours a week working at this coffee roaster, I had continued to volunteer more and more for the publishing company. And I would work, and then I would go home. And throughout the week, I would spend another 15 to 25 hours a week volunteering to edit books
my
and journals
good
and magazines.
Lord.
I was doing it all the time.
So you had all this awake time.
And as I was
Oh my
recognizing
gosh.
that I was not enjoying working in the coffee industry anymore, I was simultaneously realizing that I loved every minute that I was volunteering in editing. So it became quickly apparent that I should probably make a career transition.
I would think so.
And it was very obvious to me what this career transition should be. So fortunately, the owner of the company was seeing the same thing, that this job was not for me. And I went into work one day at 8 a.m. on a Monday, and he said, "Hey, would you come into your office? I want to chat." He said, "I don't think that this job is for you." And I said, "I don't think this job is for me either." And I went home at 8:10, and I designed my first business card by 9 a.m. and I printed it at the Minuteman Press in town. And I contacted Eileen, who ran Punctum Books and had been my mentor there. And I said, "Hey, today I'm making a career transition. I'm no longer working in the coffee industry. I am now a professional editor, and this is what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to need some clients." I said, "Are there any books that authors have submitted to you recently that just didn't make the cut, that you would like to publish, but they need more work than this nonprofit volunteer-run publishing company is ready to invest in it? Because if they are willing to hire a professional editor to help get the book up to snuff, I would like to fill that gap." And she said, "Yeah, I think we have that." So she hung up the phone. 20 minutes later, she called me back and said, "I just talked with an author who had submitted a manuscript that we really liked, but it wasn't in the shape that we needed it in. And he's going to email you, and he would like to hire you for editing." And that was my first client. And that was how I made the leap into publishing.
How fascinating.
Yeah.
How
Thanks.
absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
And so from there, you went to Something or Other Publishing.
Yeah. So I, at that time, I just sort of got on LinkedIn, and I started participating in conversations where I saw authors in groups and in threads talking about how they were writing a book, were ready to publish a book, and needed some help with editing or whatever other advice that they needed in order to get their book out into the world. I would simply provide the answers that I had from years of volunteering at a publishing house. So I built up my client list that way. And one of the people that I met along the way was a man who was starting a really interesting new model of publishing. He called he called the publishing company something or other. This was the acronym of this something or other publishing is SOUP, and the concept behind this was that they were taking books soup to nuts. Which was a phrase I had not heard at the time. And
What's the phrase?
soup to nuts.
Soup to nuts. Okay.
Something or other, soup to nuts. I
Yeah.
like that.
And the concept behind this was essentially it wasn't quite crowdfunding, but it was a sort of democratic reader investment system of publishing. So rather than the publishing company simply saying, yes, we're interested in your book. Now we're going to dump $10,000 into producing it, and then it'll be a product, and we'll see how the world reacts. It was we're going to publish your idea, and then we want to get people's interest in it. So they would, when an author would come to Soup, they would essentially pitch their book, and then the pitch would go online, and then people could vote. Yes, I would like this. I would like this to be a book, and I would like to buy this book. Or no, I'm not really interested. And so it was sort of a metric to find out, is this book a good thing to invest in? Should we be putting the money into this up
That's
front?
interesting.
Is there enough interest in it? Are there enough readers who want this book
So
to
what-
exist?
So what kind of
Mhm.
books would end up being on this?
Yeah, okay, that's a great question. There was a lot of fiction. A lot of fiction came up, from collections of short stories to entire novels. There were some nonfiction, although I'm really struggling to remember them. Interestingly enough, some of the most notable books to come out of that project were the founder's own books about his experience growing up internationally. If I recall, part of this story involved him being kidnapped by one of his parents and taken overseas, and growing up and finding his religion and his spiritual base, which is now a central part of his life. And so he wrote a 3-book series about his own memoirs, and
Okay.
I believe that these are still the most popular books on that platform.
So, but does he do other people's books as well?
Yeah, there are a number of books. One book that I really enjoyed working on that is very memorable is a book called The Time Manipulator's Son. This is a fiction story set in Trinidad and Tobago, and also some alternate universe. This kind of combines a Harry Potter-like story of a young boy who discovers his special abilities, with a sort of a Bermuda Triangle portal to an alternate dimension sort of thing, in which there are these alternate worlds that sort of spill out into Trinidad and Tobago, where the author was from. The story was so endearing. It was really charming. It was a pleasure to work with this author, Rohini Singh, on her book and help it get ready for publication.
So, explain to me a little bit more about how this concept of crowdfunding a book works, because I'm kind of so do you just submit an idea and then the writer writes the book, or is the book already written?
Yeah, I think it would go both ways. It was definitely preferable for there to already be a manuscript, because I mean, I can't tell you in this industry how many people say they want to write a book and
Right.
are ready to talk about what the book would be if only it were written, and then find when it is time to sit down
And
with
write
pen
it.
to ink that it actually takes a lot more work to write a book than some people are
So
prepared
they
to
would
do.
already be a
Yeah.
manuscript. The best
There's
scenario would
usually
be
already a manuscript.
a
Yeah.
manuscript, and then they would just you take that the concept and you would put it on there, and okay, so
Yeah, we would kind of mock up like a cover. If there wasn't already a cover proposal ready, then
Mhm.
we would sort of mock up a cover, or at least some imagery, and then post it in essentially what is a blog post for the followers and the subscribers of that website to vote on. And there's a voting mechanic, and people would vote to indicate their interest. I don't quite remember if it was a yes or no, or just yes, and the no is implied, and all the people who don't
Right.
respond. But anyway, there were some thresholds, and so
Mhm.
like once we saw that like 100 people were interested, then that is sort of the starter for us to say, okay, maybe we want to develop a little more content here until we get to 200, 300, 400, 500. And I think once it reached like 800 or 900 people, we knew that there was enough interest in the book to go ahead and invest in the publication. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we're going to go to a commercial and we will continue with Andy.
The United States has a strong tradition of welcoming newcomers and refugees. The Welcome Corps is a new service opportunity for Americans inspired to welcome those seeking freedom and safety and in turn help strengthen their own communities. Welcome Corps is a public-private partnership that is inspired by what Americans represent to so many around the world, a beacon of hope and refuge. All it takes is a helping hand. Are you ready to learn more? Contact the International Institute of St. Louis at info@iistl.org or call 314-773-9090. That's info@iistl.org or call 314-773-9090.
El Potro Restaurant and Market, located at 6920 Manchester Avenue, 1 block east of McCausland, offers the finest variety of Mexican and Central American groceries and goods. El Potro Restaurant serves authentic Mexican and Central American cuisine, including daily specials, not to mention the best horchata and tastiest margaritas in St. Louis. Open 7 days a week. El Potro, 6920 Manchester Avenue, 1 block east of McCausland.
In 1857, the Dred Scott decision was a major legal event and catalyst that contributed to the Civil War. The decision declared that Dred Scott could not be free because he was not a citizen. The 14th Amendment, also called the Dred Scott Amendment, granted citizenship to all born or naturalized here in our country and was intended to overturn the U.S. Supreme Court decision on July 9, 1868. The Dred Scott Heritage Foundation is requesting a commemorative stamp to be issued from the U.S. Postal Service to recognize and remember the heritage of this amendment by issuing a stamp with the likeness of the man Dred Scott. But we need your support and the support of thousands of people who would like to see this happen. To achieve this goal, we ask you to download, sign, and share the one-page petition with others. To find the petition, please go to dredscottlives.org and click on the Dred Scott Petition Drive on the right side of the page.
Hi, we are now back with Andy, and we are going to talk a little bit about Edit Right. Now, you sent me a quote. Your book represents you said. It's like a very large business card. So if it's important to make a good impression with your book, then invest a professional quality product. It's worth it. So you're a consultant for Edit Right.
Right.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, sure. So, I've really struggled to figure out what to call Edit Right, how to describe Edit Right. When I started back when I was
Now, is this your company?
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, Edit Right is a company that I founded in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, it didn't mean anything more than the LLC under which I was filing my taxes as a copy editor.
That's kind of where my company's at. It's all it is an LLC. The Blue Rooster Company is just the LLC.
Right, which is, what we recommend to most authors for publishing your book. It's nice to have an imprint. Honestly, when most people file their taxes, it's still done on a 1040 or whatever under
Right.
a person's own identity, and the LLC isn't that important. And yet in publishing and in lots of business, it is kind of important to have an LLC in case something scary comes along and threatens your livelihood.
Right.
It is much better to be able to fold an LLC than to sacrifice all of your future earnings as
Right.
an individual. But
Your
hey,
house,
let's
your car.
let's not go down that hypothetical
No, let's not go
road.
down there.
So, if I were coming up with a name for my business today, I might come up with something different because what I have done as a business person has changed radically over the
Mhm.
years. At that time in 2012, I was strictly providing copy editing and proofreading. These were the things that brought me the most comfort. It was like folding the laundry. It was very easy for me to just sit down with a manuscript and do 4 to 6 hours of editing on a book and call it a day. I really enjoyed that. I still really enjoy that. However, as it happens, most of my clients ended up being self-publishing authors. How do I say this? For whatever reasons, it seems like most of the self-publishing authors who have heard about the ability to self-publish and expressed interest in a manuscript, they get some advice from some blogs that they find online or from their friends who want to help encourage them to publish a book. And the piece of information that everybody hears is, if you want to publish a book, you need an editor. And I was happy to be the editor for those people. But what I wasn't so stoked about was to find out when the book was published and released that the editor was the only piece of the formula that author sought out and invested in. I knew enough by that point about the publishing industry to know there's so much more work that needs to go into publishing a book. Cover design, crucial. A marketing plan, crucial. The time and ability to sit down and call bookstores or show up in person to bookstores and say, I have written a book and I would love for you to carry it. Here are some incentives for why you should carry this and why people want to buy this. There are just 100 other things to do, not instead of, but in addition to hiring an editor. So I quickly realized after just a few years of copy editing and proofreading for authors that it would greatly behoove me and my authors to start providing more advice than just fixing people's typos. It made me very happy to provide probably typo-free manuscripts to authors and help improve the quality of their manuscripts themselves. But I hadn't been doing any work to improve the quality of the author's presentation of their book. I hadn't been doing a lot of work to help coach authors through understanding why and how their book appeals to readers and what readers are going to want to do to engage in this book, why readers are going to want to buy it and why they're going to want to talk about it and what they're going to say when they talk about it. These things are fundamental to becoming a successful author. Success can mean a whole lot of different things to a whole lot of different people. Some people are perfectly happy to just hold a copy of a published book in their hands. And then at the end of the day, if that investment hasn't come back around and they've invested hundreds or thousands of dollars into publishing a book, I can't help but think that there's probably a tiny hole inside of them that they wish that they could fill with some extra book sales. So within a few years of running EditRight, I started to provide more comprehensive services. This included writing coaching, helping people to develop their book in the first place, and developmental editing, and then expanded into marketing consulting and design services, building websites, all of the kinds of services that a self-publishing author might need in order to publish a book.
What do authors need to know when choosing between self-publishing and traditional publishing?
Sure. Okay. Great question. Whether to publish traditionally or self-publish, it can be a deeply personal choice. This is this is the number one question that people come to me with. I have coached hundreds of authors through the publishing process, and almost everybody starts from the position of saying, I have a finished book, or I'm about to have a finished book and I want to publish it. And I don't know whether to self-publish this or whether to traditionally publish this. 30 years ago, this was not a question. There were just publishing houses, and to self-publish a book meant to to invest $10,000 or $20,000 into printing copies and then lug them around in the trunk of your car, keep them in crates in your garage or even in your basement,
Yep.
and sell them one at a time. And the challenge to do this was simply too high to make it appealing to 99% of authors.
Mhm.
And so you simply wrote query letters and found a literary agent, or you didn't publish the book at all. Or you took it to Kinko's and printed it on 8.5 by 11 paper instead of as a paperback or hardcover book. And then around the mid 90s, maybe the late 90s, there was this sort of printing revolution where the espresso book machine was invented and suddenly could produce paperback perfect bound books for dollars. And it could print one book at a time. And this one thing revolutionized
Right.
access to self-publishing for authors. It meant that no longer was there a need to print 1,000 or 2,000 copies of a book
Right.
in order to justify the printing cost. Now you could literally just print one book at a time. You could print one book, you can take it to your bookstore, say, would you like to carry this? And if it sells, go print a second book. That doesn't mean, just because the bar is lowered for access to self-publishing, it doesn't mean that that self-publishing is easy. In fact, it is a huge challenge. Yeah,
It absolutely is a monumental challenge by
So,
itself.
in addition to I mean, there are 100 questions that we could talk about to determine whether or not an author is prime for self-publishing or traditional publishing. What I find that it frequently boils down to is what do you want to do with your book, and how much work do you personally want to invest in the production and dissemination of your book? Some of the key components here are the costs of production itself. To professionally produce a book, it can take anywhere from $2,000 or $3,000 to $10,000 to $15,000. It depends on what kind of book you are making. And on top of this, the project management skills and the number of things that go into both creating a physical copy of a book and maybe an ebook copy, and preparing a marketing plan and getting this book out into the world, into bookstores. Getting a book into a bookstore is one thing. Getting people to buy the book once it is at the bookstore is another thing. And that is something that a lot of people don't prepare for and don't anticipate. It is really easy. It is really easy to think, I have a book. It has meant enough to me to publish the book. So therefore, it will mean the same thing to other people, and other people will
And
want
it
to read it. But
doesn't.
at the end of the day, it just doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't.
And I have seen people at every point on this spectrum. I have seen people who invest in editing, but not in a cover design. And listen, I am an editor. I really want to advocate for editing. I believe that it is very, very important in book publishing and in all kinds of publishing. And also, it is literally the last thing that has an effect on a reader. Good editing only comes into play when a person reads your book. But before that point, it matters whether it has an attractive cover design. That is going to affect whether people
Yes.
pick up the book in the first place.
Right.
It matters whether or not you were able to get it into a bookstore or into a reader's hands. Otherwise, they won't even have a chance to look at the cover. So there are a ton of factors that affect how difficult it can be, not to publish, but to succeed in publishing.
Right.
So it's important to me to understand an author's needs in terms of their goals. Is the goal just to create a memoir of your life's chronicles so that your grandchildren and great-grandchildren can read about who you are, and you only want to print 20 or 30 copies of this book? Then a publisher is definitely not for you.
Right.
But how much investment is appropriate to self-publish a book like that? That is a very nuanced discussion, but that makes it easy to decide whether traditional publishing or self-publishing is right. However, lots of authors show up with books that they have written and want a publisher because they don't want to show up and market and sell their own book. And the very difficult conversation that I have to have with authors in that position is, well, then why would a publisher want to publish your book? The author, listen, authors, you are the biggest advocate for your book.
Right.
No one else is simply going to, unless you have written a book on, for a self-help group or a 12-step program, no one else is just going to pick up your book and run with it. No one else is going to pick up your book and want to become an advocate if you haven't shown up in the first place to give a workshop, to do a talk, to share your book with people. Yeah.
If you're not passionate about your book, nobody else is going to be passionate about your book.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So that is one of the most.
By the way, he used it twice.
Nobody
counted.
It only counts as one because it was twice in a row. Keep the counter running.
Yeah. What do most authors get wrong when publishing their books?
Okay. Yeah. Well, this definitely just continues the conversation that we were just having. I might have slid into it by accident, but probably the thing that most authors get wrong about publishing their books is not being prepared with a vision for how this book is going to interact with the public in the real world. What is the audience that is going to be interested in the book? Why would they be interested? And how are they going to hear about it? How are people going to hear about the book, and where are they going to find it? These are some of the most important questions to answer about publishing.
Let me ask you, is there like a checklist, or say somebody comes to you, they have a book that they think is gonna, it's right up there with War and Peace, or they're right up there with Gone with the Wind, or it's the God's gift to the planet for books. Okay. And they come to you and they say, this is it. This is going to make you $1 million.
Yeah.
Okay. What do you tell them?
Okay. Yeah. Well, the difficult conversation to have at that point is, how are people going to find this book?
Slow down.
Yeah. How?
Let's talk. No, I mean, okay. I've got a book.
Yeah.
I am passionate about my book. I think it is the greatest book on the earth. Is there a checklist that you give them? Is there, what is it how do you start that conversation?
Yeah, here's where that conversation starts. What other books currently exist that readers who will want to read your book also like? We call these comp titles. Comp title means comparable or competitor. Not everybody in publishing likes to think of other books as competitive because, as it happens, people buy more than one book. So comparable is the word that I tend to prefer, and what a lot of other people prefer, but we think of these as comp titles. These are other books that are similar to yours. So if you are writing, if you're writing in the fantasy genre, right, or the romance genre, it is very easy to find comp titles. There are other fantasy books all over the place. There are other romance books all over the place. But if you're writing on a really nuanced subject, especially in nonfiction, it can be a little more difficult to find comp titles. And yet they're everywhere. If you get on Amazon, which started as a book selling company and now sells so much more, it's really easy to browse for books and see what other books are being recommended to people who are looking at this particular title, and what other books are people buying that are related to this. So what I find in these conversations with authors who show up and say, I have a great book, simultaneously, they're frequently saying, no one else has ever written a book like this. This is the only book that exists like this. And I can say more than 99% of the time, that's not true. We as a species have been publishing books for hundreds and hundreds of years. Everybody has an idea. Everybody how many people have you talked to who say, I want to write a book, or who tell you, people tell me all the time I should write a book about this. Sometimes that is just a polite way to get out of conversation with somebody who talks a lot. And other times it's because people have great stories, and the people who hear these stories say, wow, I love every time this person talks, they have a unique and fun story. I wish that they would write a book about this. And they say that. But at the end of the day, whether you are writing about a topic that is the subject of seminars and workshops all of the time, you know, project management or business development, or a deeply personal memoir, there are other people
Who've done the same thing.
who have written a book like this, but there are also other people who have read books like yours, and that is the most important part of the formula to understand. Because, like I said before, people buy more than one book, and people who buy fantasy books tend to buy a lot of fantasy books. People who buy romance books tend to buy a lot of romance books, and people who buy memoirs tend to buy a lot of memoirs. So what is really important to drill down on at the beginning of a conversation like that, I have a great book and no one has ever read a book like this, or just I have a great book. Okay, what are the other great books that people have written, that people have published, that people read, that are similar to yours? Because that is going to craft how we shape this book, how we shape this book in development, how we shape this book's marketing plan, how we shape this book's release and its announcement. We want to not copy and paste other books' plans. Right. We don't want to copy and paste their covers. We don't want to copy and paste their content or their marketing plan and press releases. But we can identify through knowing what other books are out there that are similar to these, that people who have bought those books will be interested in buying my book. That really helps us to see, what have they done that has been successful, and what have they done that has not been successful? Because those are lessons that we can take at every step of the book's release, book's production, its release, and beyond. That's where that conversation starts.
Do authors really need to copyright their books?
Oh, copyright. Okay. Yeah. So once upon a time, there were,
in a land far away,
in this very land right here, the United States has some really interesting and unique copyright laws. One of those is that when you write something, it is immediately, automatically, and irretractably copyrighted to you. Officially, like, you own the copyright. When I take my notebook and I write, I am talking with Gael.
Don't forget the 2 dots over the first
little
E.
umlaut over the E.
Or diareses. In English, they're called diareses.
Diareses.
In English, it's called diareses. In German, it's umlaut.
I see. My apologies.
No, it's something I learned.
Diareses. With the diareses over the E.
First E.
This sentence is copyrighted to me. Now, it doesn't mean much because this is not a super unique sentence. Many people have said this before, and so copywriting it would be futile.
Right.
But if I were to write a whole book like this in my notebook, then it becomes more important, especially if I want to publish that. It is copyrighted to me. I own it. They're my words. They're original once I have written them beyond a certain point. And that used to mean something. It used to be easy to produce a paper trail, physical or digital, right? This is my notebook. It has been my notebook for a long time. It is full of my writings. And it would be easy for me if someone else saw my notebook at a coffee shop, took a photo of it, and went and published my words online, on a blog, in a book. It would be easy for me to show a judge, hey, judge, actually, those are my words. That's my book. Is copyrighted to me. And here's the proof. Here's the rest of my notebook. It has on the very first page what year I started writing it. And you can tell when I wrote these words because it's between this page and this page. And they all have dates on them. That's all good and well. Until several years ago. I want to say 2017, maybe 2018. I could be wrong about this. The Supreme Court issued an opinion in a case about copyright that completely changed how copyright not how copyright works, but how an author is allowed to defend their copyright. And now the official rules are that you are not allowed to bring a case to court regarding copyright of your works unless you have officially registered that copyright with the United States Copyright Office. So even though on the books, these words in my notebook are still copyrighted to me, unless I have taken photos of this notebook and mailed them to the Copyright Office and paid my $45 for a copyright application, if I find that someone has taken photos of my work and published them in some form, I'm not allowed to take that to court. The judge has to throw that case out immediately unless I have filled out that application. Why is this relevant to authors? Well, piracy is real. It maybe isn't as big of an issue as lots of people make it out to be, but people take ebooks most commonly. If you publish your book in electronic format, as an EPUB, as a Mobi, even as a PDF, people really like their free stuff. And there are people in the world who are dedicated to copying these ebooks and then posting them on websites where people can download them for free. This is problematic for authors for obvious reasons. Publishing books is not extremely lucrative. We don't have high profit margins here.
No,
so
absolutely.
If your book is successful enough that people want to pirate it, first of all, congratulations. It is nice that people are interested in your work. But second of all, you need a recourse. You need the ability to employ the United States government and its justice system to make websites take down your pirated work so that people pay for them instead of being able to just download them for free. Some people do this very maliciously. Other people do it for lack of means. I'm not going to pretend that it's not important for people to be able to access literature for free, but can I be honest? When we're talking about books, that's what libraries are for. That is why our money funds libraries. But to take a book off the internet for free, not through a library, is literally taking money directly out of an author's pocket.
Right.
So I want to implore all authors out there, please officially copyright your book. Yes, it is technically copyrighted to you from the time that you typed the end. It was copyrighted to you from the time you typed in the beginning. But if you have not officially registered your copyright with the U.S. Copyright Office, it doesn't mean squat. You cannot take it to court. And it's very important.
That is a new law.
Mm-hmm.
That's new.
Yeah, it's not a law. It's
not a law.
It's a Supreme Court decision.
Right.
And so while, local jurisdictions may be divided about this, copyright is frequently handled on the federal level, and the federal courts are going to follow the Supreme Court's decisions because we work on case law.
Right.
Yeah.
So, folks, the federal government has found a new way to make more money by making sure that you do that $45 or whatever it is and do your process.
It's worth it for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That is really sucko.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
It really is.
It is.
That really is.
Yeah, we'll see if that changes in the future.
But for the moment, do your $45
yeah,
or
because
whatever
if you
it
catch
costs.
someone stealing your book, it's one thing for a person to take an ebook and put it on a website, but because of the way that this Supreme Court decision affects people's copyright in the real world, if you published a book, I could, if you had not copyrighted that officially with the Copyright Office, and I knew that because I believe that you can look up these records, your copyright, and see what is copyrighted. If I found out that you had published a book and had not officially copyrighted it with the Copyright Office, I could literally just go take that book, put a different cover on it, and re-release it under my own name, and you would not be able to do anything about it except be mad at me. That's important.
That
if
is
your
important.
story is important to you, then it is important to copyright.
It is very
Yeah.
important.
Thanks for letting me talk about this important topic.
Yeah, that is brand new to me. That
It's
is
shocking,
brand.
right?
It
Yeah.
is. It's made me. It's not rare. It's not often that I'm speechless, but right at the moment I'm speechless. Oh my goodness! What does a book coach do?
Oh, okay. Yeah, let's change topics for a second.
Yeah,
Because
because I
that's a
really
little-
do want to talk about book coaching because that's something that I am doing a bit of,
That's
and
right. Yeah.
so I really like to talk about that for a minute. We have 54. All right, we have 6 minutes.
Okay, sure. Yeah. In 6 minutes,
6
let me tell
minutes.
you about book
Right.
coaching. Well, book coaching means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, as I'm sure that you know. In some contexts, people might call just your developmental editor a book coach. Developmental editor is the person who helps you develop your book, quite simply. So whether your book is not yet finished and you only have it as an idea, or whether you have finished writing your first draft of your manuscript and now you need someone to go through paragraph by paragraph through your book and help you improve it for the next, whatever that means to you. A developmental editor is the person who helps you take your first draft and make it a better second draft, or a second draft and make it a better third draft, etc. Some people might call that a book coach, and a book coach might do some developmental editing, but they're not truly synonymous. A book coach will typically do a whole lot more than just edit the book. Book coaches tend to work with authors as sort of hand holders and guides
See, that's more
through
of
the
what I
publishing
do.
process. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't do editing. I don't.
Right.
I am just exactly the opposite of you. I hate editing. I taught school for 39 years and I
Yeah.
had to edit
Yeah, I'm sure.
students' papers. No, thank you. Okay, done.
Well,
But
yeah, I
I
mean,
do like helping a writer get through the writing process and
Yeah.
helping them figure out what they want to write and helping them
yeah.
develop their ideas and talk to them about how they want to get their ideas done and how they want to get it on paper.
Yeah. And so where that transcends from developmental editing into book coaching is when you are focusing on a lot more elements of the big picture.
Right.
When you were thinking during developmental editing, not just like, okay, here's what I think you should write for chapter 2. Here's the outline that I think
I
you
like
should
to
have for
ask
your
the
book.
questions.
Asking questions is the most helpful. Yeah. Help people to think instead of just telling them what
Right.
to do.
Ask the questions. What do you want from your character here? What does your character look like? How does your
Yeah.
character behave? What is your
Yes.
character thinking? Those are the questions I like to talk about.
Yeah.
It's no different than teaching a class.
And most of those decisions stay relevant only within the book itself.
Right.
And when a book is in an abstract form, when it is not open in your hands and reading it, what a character is doing with their spare time, how they grew up and what they're thinking, these things aren't relevant to a consumer who has not yet become a reader. When you are thinking of a book in terms of broader, the things we were talking about earlier, where is this going to end up on bookshelves? What other books are going to be near it when a librarian makes a themed display in their
Mhm.
library of books with characters from the early 19th century, or
Right.
books from authors in St. Louis, local authors in St. Louis, whatever the theme of the display is in a library or bookstore. When you are thinking about the book's context beyond what is on the page and more how is this a product that people interact with in real life, then you are acting as a book coach. Book coaches help with those marketing aspects of a book, will help to collect all of the aspects of the book, including
Mhm.
both the data itself, like what is on the back cover, and the metadata. What is the book's ISBN number? What is its Library of Congress cataloging number?
Right.
All of these are the kinds of things that a book that a developmental editor is not going to help so much with, but a book coach is going to help an author through this process.
Right.
From
That's what. Yeah.
from a manuscript to a published book and
Right.
beyond.
That's
So
kind of where I'm. That's me. That's
absolutely,
That's what you do.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
absolutely. I'll call that 4. We book coaches work as guides through the whole publishing process,
Right.
not just during editing, but book coaches will frequently hire and manage or refer the author to
That's what I like.
We're
to do.
talking in the self-publishing process here,
Right.
of course. Who to work with in order to make this book a finished product, and then what to do with it publicity wise, marketing wise. Book coaches can work like my services a la carte. Here's a little bit of help because this is exactly what you need, or let me help you through this entire process, and we'll think about the big picture here as well.
Okay,
as
so
little
how
details.
do they get in touch with you?
Okay, yeah. Well, you can reach me at editwright.com. That is EDITWRIGHT. We have a portfolio of our services and our previous projects there on our website at editwright.com. You can email me at andrew@editwright.com. I would love to hear from you.
Okay. Thank you for tuning in to Author's Edge. Tune in again next week for more tips, resources, and your favorite conversations. Our next guest will be Greg Stout, and we will be chatting about his newest book, Woman in the Wind. Till then, see you around the inkwell. Bye.